Okay, so this workshop is going to be on blockchain technology. Uh, so does anyone here know anything about blockchain technology? Okay, I'll take that as a no. Okay, so blockchain is essentially, okay, so you can think of it as a distributed database. So whenever you build an app, everybody has to store data somewhere. And let's say you use Amazon Web Services or Google Cloud. Then in that case, your data will be stored with Amazon or Google or whatever centralized provider you're using. But in blockchain, everything will be stored in a decentralized way, which means no one person controls it. And because no one person controls it, it will always be, well, truthful. And this makes it a way to build decentralized applications because your data is not stored with any one person. So how do you build on blockchain? So for every app, there's three main parts, as you may know. There's the front end, there's the back end, and there are the APIs that connect them together. Right? Now, for the front end, blockchain apps are very similar to normal apps. Right? So you could use a JavaScript framework or a Python framework like Django. And to connect to the back end, this is what's really different. You have to use something such as like a library such as Web3.js or Ethers.js. All right. So there's documentation on Ethers.js on their website. So for example, when you try to sign into a normal app, you would have to use Google or Apple or Facebook. But in decentralized apps, there are no centralized providers who provide these things, right? So instead, you're going to log in with a blockchain wallet. So let me just show you what that looks like. So, for example, I have a MetaMask account, and this would be my wallet. This 0xE7, it's like 32 characters. And this is what's going to identify me on my application, right? So over here, it there's code on how you can do this. So for example, with the extension that I have, which is called MetaMask, it's very popular with a lot of people who use Ethereum. This injects code into every website and allows them to use something called the window.ethereum object. And this allows people to sign in with MetaMask or sign transactions with their MetaMask wallet, etc., as opposed to using email, password, or Google, right? And there's also another library which is very popular called Web3.js, which has a slightly different implementation, but the basics are essentially the same. And if you want, you can look through everything over here, like how to install it, the API keys, and stuff like that. Now, the back end is very different. Now, instead of using like normally you would use, let's say, Python or Java and deploy your code to AWS, right? Or something like that. But over here, as opposed to using a traditional framework that language that you're familiar with, you use another language. For example, in Ethereum, you use a language called Solidity, which is JavaScript inspired. Um, and you deploy this to the Ethereum blockchain. So that way it is totally decentralized. And this is how you code your blockend. In fact, I'll give you guys a demo right now. So there's a website called remix.ethereum.org, which which essentially gives you a playground to deploy Ethereum smart contracts to a test network. So okay, I'll just show you the language for now. So let's say I create a new file. Let's create a simple counter. All right, now all Solidity files have to end with .sol. So like with Python, it would be .py. With Java, it's .java. With Solidity, it's .sol. Um, now, when you start your backend, you have to start with two main things. All right, the first is a comment, which is optional. Like I could delete this and the code would still work. Um, but essentially, it just identifies the license you're going to use. which is useful if you want to open source your code or something like that. Um, and you want to have restrictions on what people can use. But if you want, you can delete this, it doesn't matter. Now, this is important because this specifies the version of the language you're using. So as you know, languages get updated all the time. For example, with Python, they're currently on Python 3.7, I think. And they had a Python version 2, Python version 1, everything, right? So this essentially specifies the version of Solidity that you're going to use. And this is required. Now, to define a contract, are any of you guys familiar with classes in JavaScript? Okay, okay. So a class in Java, so this is kind of similar to a class in JavaScript, right? So if you want to create a smart contract, you have to use the keyword contract, right? And then this is going to be the name of your contract. Now, this is inspired by JavaScript and Java, so you will have a lot of curly braces, and semicolons are not optional, they are required in this language. And all your data will be immutable on the blockchain. So, for example, let's say I create a variable called count. Right? Now, what is uint256? So essentially, this is kind of like an integer. This is an integer, right? And it's 256 bits. So that would be these are the number of this is like the highest value you can store in a uint256, which is a large number. You'll almost never need that. And then you can define functions inside this, and you can also define a constructor. All right, now the constructor, wow, it's pink. So the constructor is what's going to run the first time you deploy this contract. So if I deploy it right now, the first thing, this constructor will run automatically, basically. So let's say in the constructor, I sent count to 0, right? So this means that as soon as I deploy this contract, it will go through this constructor. It will see that I set count to 0. And yeah, that's all it's going to do for now. And then I can also create functions. So let's say I create a function to get the current count. And if any of you are familiar with JavaScript, you'll notice that this looks a little similar to the functions in JavaScript. Like you use the function keyword, define it, and then curly brackets. And here you can pass in arguments. Now over here, what do you want to? So for get current count, I'm just going to return the count. That's all I want to do, right? But you're going to notice I get an error, okay? Because in let's say JavaScript, you can just return stuff. You don't have to specify it, right? But in Solidity, first of all, you have to specify it's public in this case. Sorry, I forgot to do that. And then you have to specify a returns keyword. And returns is essentially what this function will return. Pretty self-explanatory. So in this case, I'm returning a uint256, right? Now, what's the warning? Okay, so what it's saying is I can change this to view. And what view means is that no one can really interact with it. All right. Because in this case, I don't want anyone to update any state, right? I'm just getting the current count. I'm not updating it. So you can set it to view. So this will actually work. So if you save the file and click on this S icon over here and press compile. And once you get the check mark, it means it's compiled. And then go to the Ethereum looking thing and press deploy. And then over here, you can see it's deployed, right? And then I can just keep doing get current count, and it'll always be 0 because I've never changed the count, right? Let's say I actually want to increase the count. So then I could do function, let's say increase count, right? Again, same syntax as JavaScript. Now, now this is also going to be a public function. And essentially what this is going to do is it's going to set count equal to count plus 1. Right? That's what it's going to do. This is very common in many languages. If in fact, I could even set a decrease count. So over here, instead of increase, I could do decrease, and then count equals count minus one. Right? Does this make sense? Like, do you guys know how to use this syntax? Okay, thanks, man. So now I can just delete this previous one, and when I compile this and deploy again, you can see now I have a decrease count and an increase count. So if I get current count, you'll notice it's 0 because the constructor, which runs automatically, set it as 0. Right? Now if I increase count and I get the current count, it should be 1. And then if I increase it again and get it again, it's 2. And if I decrease it and then I get current count, it's 1. Right? So essentially this works. Right? Now this was a simple counter application. You can also do, there are also other data types. There's string. There's, if you want, you can have arrays. So like I did 256 array, right? So just put the square brackets after whatever type it is. And this means it will have to be like, for example, 0, 1, 2, whatever, right? So you could have arrays. You could also have enums, right, which are essentially like objects in JavaScript. So yeah, if you ever have queries, you could just Google them on Stack Overflow or something. I'm sure it'll have an answer. Um, so yeah, that was some basics to Solidity. Uh, so this is essentially how your backend's going to work. Now, currently this is deployed, as you can see over here. It says contract at 0xd8b whatever. So this means this is the address of the contract. So just like how my Ethereum wallet had an address, as you can see here, this smart contracts also have an address. Right now, in this case, it's not deployed to the actual Ethereum blockchain, just a test net. But it's this website's good if you want to practice. Again, you can check it out at remix.ethereum.org. So this is essentially how the backend works. And again, if you want to connect the front end to the backend, you could use a JavaScript library, or if you're using Python, you could use a Python library, whatever. Okay, now I want to talk about some differences that decentralized apps have from a developer's perspective. So first up, user authentication, which I already talked about. So let's say if you go to any normal app, you'll have to sign in with your email or phone number, or if you want, you can use social sign-ins like Google or Apple, right? But again, over here, you'll have to use your Ethereum wallet. For example, I'll give you an example. Let's say I go to a Web3D app, if my internet's good enough. So essentially, now, am I signed in? Okay, I'm not. So you can click on wallet, and all I have to do is click on this MetaMask option, which is the wallet I'm using. And oh wait, can you guys see my MetaMask? Oh shit, you can't. All right, let me change screen. Uh, okay, so now you guys can see my MetaMask, right? So uh, I can connect this website, and all I have to do is press connect, and that's it. Right, I'm signed in. Now currently I have a balance of 0. We don't talk about that. So that's essentially how user authentication works. Right now, file storage is also different. So let's say with a centralized server like Google Cloud, right? So you're going to store everything on Google Cloud. All your files will be stored there. But over here, everything's stored usually. You have two options: either the blockchain or IPFS. Um, so the blockchain, the reason developers don't use blockchain much to store files is because it costs money to deploy transactions, right? Because it's totally decentralized. You have to give the people a reason to store your files on their computers or whatever, right? So alternatively, there's something called IPFS. If you want, you can do some more research on this. It's very cool. It's a peer-to-peer file storage system. And essentially, this is a decentralized way to store your files. And by the way, it's also immutable. uh, which is good. So that's how user authentication and file storage would work, which are some differences. So what can you do with the D app? All right, now this has sparked a lot of controversy on social media. So um, first, you can build your own fungible token. So if you guys don't know what fungibility means, it's for example, $1 will always equal another US dollar, right? There's no significant difference. I could trade $1 for another one. It doesn't matter. The value is the same, right? That's what fungibility is. So, for example, one Ethereum, which is a decentralized token, if you didn't know, is always equal to another Ethereum. So you can build your own fungible tokens on top of a blockchain. Okay, and ERC20 is like a standard to do that. So if you guys want, you could check out this GitHub repository. It's called Open Zeppelin, um, and they have a great repo, which has essentially standards for every single contract ever. Right. So this is a ERC20. Uh, this is an ERC20 standard. It has a lot of functions like the total supply and the balance of each user and transferring. Right. So you can also use this in your own code. Like you can import it. Right. Uh, which gives you a good starting point. Now, secondly, you can also create NFTs. Now, NFTs have sparked a lot of debate. Personally, I think that, uh, for example, PNG selling for millions of dollars is very overvalued, and it's definitely a bubble. But there, as opposed to common knowledge, there are many applications of NFTs, not just useless pictures, right? You could store your medical records on the blockchain. You could store your identity on the blockchain. You can store lots of stuff on the blockchain, like concert tickets, right? So this is defined by a standard called, oh, I forgot to write it here, but it's defined by a standard called ERC 721, which again, Open Zeppelin has. And if you want, again, you could see it. Again, it has balance of, owner of, approve, stuff like that, right? Uh, Now, companies actually now are even using blockchain to track the supply chain. So supply chains have become variously complex as the decades have progressed. But blockchain, since, as I said, it is a source of truth, which is immutable, you can track where all your parts are coming from. You could track if everyone's getting paid and stuff like that. So, for example, Walmart is now using blockchain to track the supply chain. Now, what are some future prospects for this technology? Because you're never going to want to develop on a technology if you're never going to use it, right? Now, blockchain, the valuation of blockchain is expected to reach $1.4 trillion by 2030. By the way, blockchain and cryptocurrency are different. Uh, Cryptocurrency is an application of blockchain, essentially. So as you can see, blockchain still has lots of room to grow, right? But even despite this, as of right now, 2022, there are not many jobs for blockchain. Like if you try to search for blockchain developer versus if you try to search for front end developer on LinkedIn, you're going to find a lot more for front end developer. It's just more in demand, right? Um, so blockchain, there are not too many jobs for it. And currently, I tried to find official data on the average salaries of blockchain developers, but I really couldn't find any like trustworthy data sources. So take of that what you will as of right now. Uh, Now, third point, it is very correlated with cryptocurrency prices. So, uh, so cryptocurrency has, uh, well, as people would say, gone to the moon in recent years, which is why blockchain has been getting a lot of hype, right? Uh, and if cryptocurrency prices continue to rise, I expect that there will be a lot more hype and a lot more attention going towards the blockchain, right? Because cryptocurrency is definitely the most popular use of blockchain. But this can also be a bad thing because if cryptocurrency, let's say, falls a lot, then even the interest in blockchain technology and developers would fall a lot. And obviously, volatility is not something you really want in your job prospects. So because of that, it's hard to really tell the future of Web3. Uh, Well, we'll have to see how everything. By the way, if you guys, I don't think I mentioned it, but uh, so the way the web progressed was Web one was essentially read-only content, right? Like you couldn't upload anything. Web two was like your Twitters and Instagrams and Reddits. You could upload user-generated content, and Web three is supposed to be like a decentralized way of Web two, essentially using blockchain, right? So it's hard to tell the future prospects of Web three, given what I just said. So take it that what you will, but I think by the time we enter the job market, there's definitely going to be a lot more clarity. Uh, so yeah, that's all I had to say. Um, all right, and any questions? Oh, also by the way, I think this will be on YouTube. If you guys want to check it out later.